Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things. Today, we are going to talk to a very special guest, Sivakumar, who's my coach and who's also my very dear friend. He talks about his cascading passion, which has led him to several continents and countries. He talks about starting with technology at its heart, exploring cultures, and taking it to capability building of people and what makes the high performing organizations and teams. He also talks about several misgivings that could act as takeaways for all of you. Listen on. Welcome to the Software People Stories, Shiv. I'm so glad that host.
Well, great to be here. Better late than never. So I'm very happy to be bringing up the rear as one of your PM Power hosts doing this session. Great to be here.
Thank you so much, Shiv, for agreeing. One of the first things that I want to get started is that what is your passion or drive that gets you in software when you see, and it must be different in various phases of life, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. You have to begin at the beginning. So what I believe is that very often that I didn't discover passion in some very easy manner, right? I have actually experimented a lot with a lot of things. And sometimes the fact that you have a passion for something comes out of that experimentation. So like, for example, like you, I did electronics engineering, and like many decisions youngsters made then, and make today, it's just choice of branch of engineering you study is pretty much a function of how well you performed at the entrance. And did that indicate I had a passion for electrical or electronics engineering? Not really. I just followed what my performance indicated that I should pick up as the choice. Electrical engineering is a vast subject. And I experimented and I found some subjects were really, really extremely interesting subjects. Circuit design, for example, basics of electronics, the underlying principles of semiconductors and so on, the transistor effect. There are other subjects which are very packed, and electromagnetic field theory, for Maxwell's equations, not an easy thing to recall those days, and struggling with it and making sure I got through those courses without any damage. A lot of experimentation led to many things that I discovered to be my passion. Like, for example, software was a novelty. There are no big icons of software at that point in time. Certainly, the Indian software industry, the big icons of today were just starting to be icons at that point in time. So the Tata organization was the big icon then. And certainly, there are no personal experiences of my seniors working in those organizations and telling me a lot and enabling me to discover this passion, if at all I had. So we pretty much got into software without fully knowing what it was. So that led to a lot of experimentation. So for example, I didn't know a particular technology interested me more than something else. We all started mostly with Burroughs mainframes and then IBM mainframes. So at that time, the attitude was which specific aspects of technology interested someone was of no concern, either to the organization or to the individual concerned. They pretty much threw us at whichever project, whichever technology, whether it was application software or middleware development and things like that. We also felt that, look, we are all supposed to be capable people. We will just adapt, learn on the fly, and do the job. That was very much the mood of the day at that point in time. In fact, I recall there was no separate quality assurance in those organizations where I worked in at that point in time. Testing was not somebody else's job. Quality assurance was not another function. As project manager and developer and analyst, it was the project team's job. There was no special roles and functions. So all this divide later on, and development and support and quality assurance, they were all, I think, in my opinion, some later day, if I may say so, anti-patterns. I mean, this is an arguable point. So we felt that we had to do everything, and we pretty much did everything. Of course, people now have come a full 360 degrees and talk about T-skill, full stack developer. These were things we were full stack when we started our career, and that was the expectation. That over a period of time, I gravitated towards application software because there are two kinds of passions. So one was that I wanted an opportunity to interact with multiple cultures and people and different countries. I thought, and I still think, that's a fascinating thing to work and to get solutions developed in a variety of project contexts and cultures, interacting with stakeholders. So I believe that interacting with stakeholders across such a wide, diverse spectrum in terms of countries, languages, and so it's a very exciting thing. That's the key thing for my passion. It was one of the reasons for me to switch from a stable India-based job to a job which involved a lot of travel. So I had to go from the US to the Middle East to Australasia and Africa in some cases, and deal with varieties of situations. So I felt that to be the front end of a project, talking to customers, talking to the business, and then making that connection, those customers with the implementation team, was really the most exciting part of it. And I think to this day, that continues to be a major challenge for becoming project managers and program managers first time in their careers. The other thing was that related to that was I'm extremely fond of books. What that resulted in was that I became very, very fond of storytelling, right? Storytelling as a means of communication, as a means of even getting somebody to learn, pick up something. So maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So let me just rewind back a little bit to those early experiences in projects, because that which led to another passion. So I must emphasize that it was not passion for software or technology alone. That is certainly one ingredient, but all the things around software development became my passion. Like, for example, people capability development, right? Working with stakeholders, because I had experience when I had the best of project team members in a project, and the project performance was pretty disappointing, and I just couldn't figure out. We had everything going for us. And there are other occasions when the team was okay, not the top performers in the organization, very dedicated guys and girls. And the technology wasn't anything to write home about. It was mainframe support and in some cases monitoring the production schedule and things like that. Not the most exciting jobs in the world. And they were the guys who received customer accolades month after month, globally supporting some of the key warehouse applications for General Motors. In fact, the India team's performance was often cited in their newsletter. So I said, what's the difference? These are all average dudes, as far as I could see. So I think that was the recognition that the project is a social organization, among other things. It is not just an assemblage of team. The team formation, stages of team formation are all very important, but fundamentally you can't take away the fact that it is a social organization. And sometimes that makes all the difference in terms of how well people gel into that environment and are able to contribute to their best in terms of their actual performance. I believe that people motivation and therefore team motivation and their ability to rise up to higher expectations and deliver is a tricky thing, and it's not putting all the ingredients together, but still you may or may not get it. And that is when I felt that as a project manager, I had a much deeper and greater role rather than be the stereotype of being a very directive manager, which in the early days was probably my style. For a period of time, my passion became how to get project teams rise up, develop, and deliver to their full potential. I think that became a challenge. I took it upon as a personal goal that fundamentally about capability and how they do it.
Okay.
Rather than see myself as the guy to whom I expect people to come for every question that they had and expect to find an answer in. So I think that changed quite a bit, and therefore people development and therefore an interest in helping people learn, helping organizations learn became a passion. But within the organization, I think it was not the easiest to follow this path, because I was line manager, I was a delivery manager, I was accountable to the customer, profit margins and things like that. So this was focusing more on people development, coaching, mentoring. I was a different kind of a manager, I think.
It was hard, right? It is not, doesn't come automatically to say, okay, can I develop that? It means that you're actually concentrating for the future, for the long term, while getting your account management, getting your P&L in place and all of that is for today. Otherwise, your management is going to come and ask you questions. It's always a tussle in terms of operations management for the now and for the future. I think that is a balance that often managers falter, including yours truly. I have had my struggles during this period.
Yeah, absolutely bang on, Gayatri, because I did have the struggle. Because although my natural instinct of how to run, how to be responsible as a leader of the project, not just as a manager of the project, focusing on people development and the longer term goals for the individual, there was immediate pressure of having to deliver and meet goals for the customer and for the organization. It was not always easy. I could, for example, say that I could not do one part of it. So I had to do what was then considered the core of my job. So that is, in a sense, So there was certain constraint. Like there are a lot of which in later years as part of PM Power in terms of training, consulting, mentoring, coaching, and which I did for a number of customers. And in one of those customer sites, there was a person who had worked for me earlier. She actually said, Shiv, how come you didn't do this as much when you are a delivery manager, when you are a line manager? I said, absolutely, because of the juggling of priorities and I had certain other goals. So I couldn't do it as much as I wanted to, which is probably one of the reasons for the exit from the regular corporate world. Because as one of my friends used to remark, that if you are inside an organization, there is a certain leverage you have. And therefore, that is kind of limiting. When you actually step out of the organization, your leverage somehow increases. He actually showed me this picture of, I think Archimedes it was, and with a proper lever and with the proper fulcrum, it shows the picture of Archimedes lifting the world, right? So sometimes when you are outside, you have that fulcrum and you have that lever. So even today, sometimes people say some of the actions that I suggest to customers are all common sense, I would say. And people will say, no, but Shiv, you as a consultant, you come and say this, you will have the years of the senior management and leadership. So that is another symptom of people feeling that somehow from outside we have a greater leverage and influence, which is probably true in a lot of cases. And that is one of the contributing reasons of moving out of regular corporate career into more training, consulting, coaching, and so on.
I'm curious. So when you were speaking about high performing individuals having a clear project goal, it didn't really succeed. And what were the key learnings? Can you elaborate on that story? That will hit the home, right? In terms of motivated individuals and everything.
I think it's a good question. I'm just thinking about some specific projects where we had the situation. I think to use an oft repeated phrase, even a cliche, you can say lack of goal alignment. And when I say that, in many cases, it could start all the way from the customer or his articulation or his business case and things like that. In this particular project, I'm thinking of as an example, nobody really knew why the customer was doing what he was doing. Like, for example, it was a retail chain and it was not a very big retail chain. It was based in the Pittsburgh area. His USP was that he would have a retail chain focusing on servicing senior citizens. So even this was several years back, he had facilities in the application suite of tracking them, knowing their regular orders. Some of these features may be bread and butter features for retail chains, online shopping today. But this was a time when he was specially catering to senior citizens, their location, their preferred times for package delivery. So he will actually deliver packages at home. So this was the application and he needed some upgrades. It's a pretty interesting project. But what happened over a period of time was he was actually building lots of bells and whistles, which had nothing to do with servicing senior citizens more effectively. So there were certain features which were clearly mapped to this persona of senior citizen shopping or placing an order either online or in person and then getting service. So we kept discovering a lot of things which are quite outside, like for example, interface with a number of point of sale devices. The senior citizen is not going to had no use for all these interfaces. So we were wondering, why on earth, are all these interfaces being built? And things like that. There are other features also which are quite outside the main core business case. So then we figured out that he was actually building a product. Vision was not just to service senior citizens in his 3-4 stores. He was spending close to $500,000, which itself should have raised some doubts as to the kind of investment he was making given his size of operations. So he was actually building a product, hoping to sell the product. He was diversifying into another business. He was looking for a mid-tier, comprehensive retail solution. That's what he was building. And we had signed up for a specific set of enhancements. So obviously you can see the disconnect that we were questioning everything. And there are a lot of discussions relating to, but you didn't tell us, this requirement was not there. All the classic instant hope disconnect arose because he didn't really share his vision. He had his own motives. He didn't want to tell us that he was developing a product. He just had got funding for this entire product from some other source. And he only told us this is a solution for his 4 or 5 stores. So there is this constant disconnect and a lot of bad blood created because of this lack of vision. And this was one contributing factor. It had its roots at the customer side. And because it was a flow down from the customer vision, it percolated into the team. There are people who went on site. Then the people here did not quite gel. They blamed the people who went on site because they said, oh, you didn't do a proper job of requirements. Look, all these things, requirements are coming now. So you guys just went, had a good time there in Pittsburgh, and then came back. And now we are seeing all the can of worms opening up. There was a lot of within the team conflicts and people of varying skills. And so I think this lack of alignment, I would say, is the biggest reason. And the team was really, really capable. Outside influences and even intra-team conflicts were so rampant that we were close to being sued by the customer. Whether he was right in suing is another matter. But there were all kinds of very unpleasant situations. And the anticlimax was this project always used to come out with flying colors in all process audits. So whatever you wanted to check in terms of process, they would have it bang on. So that's the irony of it. I'm not an anti-process guy, and with all due respect to process and quality professionals. But these things do happen. I believe that there is some fundamental lack of alignment and the team gelling together were the two major reasons for this kind of a mess. I realized that very rarely our individual capability, there could always be some shortages and shortfalls. I have seen projects so completely fail because of technical ability of people. I have not seen that very often. And if it did happen, it was caught very early and we provided the right support in terms of training, mentoring. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Actually, when you're saying this, right, it's also to some extent, trust is like a domino effect. Once the trust between the client and the wears off, within the team also there is a lot of trust, lack of trust. Sometimes when we often hear this term, success breeds more success. It
Right.
also is with mistrust, right? When you say, okay, didn't you ask this question? Didn't you try this? Can you tell me the chain of events? When there is an escalation that happens, there's always this who did what at what point in time. That's when leadership has to rise, right? Not necessarily when there is a lot of success. When you actually say there's a problem, not necessarily getting into the questioning each action, but more from a looking at the root cause. Very well put, Shiv. I like the whole concept of crystallizing and saying that the vision was missing, while they shared a very, very small myopic view of it. But when we actually started viewing it, there was so many other tanglement.
Yeah, I think I also, as the delivery leader at that point in time, the responsibility was very much mine. Only thing is, this kind of an extreme situation and project was well underway, and even the people at the front didn't quite understand what was going on with the customer side. So much of this, what I'm telling you, is something which was all covered. And by the time the horse had already bolted from the stable. This was all discoveries made later, and look at it from a business standpoint. Somebody is giving you a $500,000 project. So people will say, Shiv, why are you worrying about vision and alignment? Yes, he's giving you $500,000 to do the project. That is the mindset. And if the front end at the customer side don't even sense this problem early on. See, that was the situation. So it was all discoveries made at the hindsight. Maybe I learned a lot from that episode, and I used to ask a lot of questions. People say initiation time is the time when a lot of devils in the details at initiation time. So I used to ask a lot of questions, sometimes much to the annoyance of salespeople. Ask very probing questions. Why are we really doing this? Who is going to be impacted? A lot more probing, because ultimately some of these problems could well have been anticipated and the red flags raised earlier. So anyway, that is so much hindsight 2020 based on that project. So that was that, and of course the other experience was a team which was performing so wonderfully well. And it was a realization that 50 to 60 plants and warehouses in General Motors, they depended on their fixes. If they didn't provide the fix in 4 hours, parts will not leave the General Motors warehouse, and General Motors will incur a penalty. It's not that the work was exciting. The business impact of what they were doing was abundantly clear to them. And when they met their service levels and the downtime was contained, they received fantastic commendations. So I think that alignment was fully there. What was the need for response time? What would happen if they did not meet those response times was abundantly clear to the India team. And that made all the difference. And the alignment was almost by default. It was automatic. When the customer initiated this engagement, he said, look, if you guys don't do something not to our expectations, this is the consequence. So understand how our success is going to be impacted by your success. That was very, very clear. I think that is a major thing. And in many cases, I think you're exactly right. When there is that lot of trust, we worked for another company which eventually was taken over by Nokia. It was a path-breaking effort in enabling mobile content, right? And how to massage the content, depending on various target platforms, whether you have a phone or any other device. So there the goal was to establish a complete trust relationship between the customer team and the India team as a provider. And that was a stated goal. He said, I want the engineers in India to be as good as the engineers I have back in the US. So that was the customer's goal, right? And that bred a lot of close interactions, and you can't achieve that kind of parity without a lot of openness and trust. So you are exactly right that is a very important thing. And once there is a breakage, you're right, you put it nicely that there's a domino effect, and that is a domino effect. And then
And in my experience, some of it is also about large scale application development. There, the volatility of requirements are a lot higher. When we often call this VUCA, right? When there's too much volatility, handling that, and but maintenance, even when there is a lot of volatility, when there is a lot of stress, SLAs and then very very well gelled, and incrementally you have to keep making improvements and changes. Human mind, it's almost having smaller capsules of work that you can do, and you can keep moving from one point to the other. I think that helps and enables towards high performing. In fact, that's one of the reasons when I coach, I normally say, what is the next goal that you want to give? Just get to that and then go to the next goal. Because sometimes, while we often call this don't have too much of a narrow vision, but sometimes that helps to say, okay, what is the next goal before we get distracted?
Absolutely. I think all the iterative ways of development and now Scrum and I think that concept of all increments, a goal for that, just that increment, I think brings that tremendous focus, and now that's become the default way of developing software. And I think, and I could see a lot of change from the customer's point of view to be able to invest that kind of time. It's not just a requirements document and throw it over the wall and let the guys worry about how to build it. No, that's vastly different. I mean, the way the business landscape and the technology landscape are very different. There's a sea change, and this is the only way of developing path-breaking software, competitive software within a short time. I think it's a very important breakdown, not just focus on the big vision for the entire release. I think it's important to focus on the short term and keep making incremental progress.
You spoke about people development, right? More you worked with people, stakeholder management, people development. If you think about it, a people development and stakeholder management is really two sides of the same coin. You may think that you are actually managing people, managing cultures in both ways, your own team as well as the culture or the manifestation of how you want to work with clients. How did that change? You started as a technologist working with different technologies. How did that transition?
Yeah, I think you raise an interesting point, because it's fundamentally about people interactions, right? Whether it is a stakeholder who's 10,000 miles away, or whether it is your own team right here in Bangalore or Mumbai at that point in time. So it is about, I used to go by the book in terms of engaging with stakeholders. See, there is all this body of knowledge and things like that, right? But that body of knowledge, of course, keeps evolving and changing. So there's a certain approach to managing stakeholders, right? There is a certain, you do this, you develop this PI grid, develop strategies for managing the high power, high interest stakeholders, and all that nice stuff is there. I'm not decrying any of that theory. Fundamentally, I believe, it dawned on me for a period of time, and it's not an easy thing to be very passionate about, because if you have been firefighting, these are not instances with stakeholders, either customer side or team side. You say, oh, now I have a passion for firefighting, all these kind of situations. But I think the moral of the story is that I realized that apart from all these models and stakeholder management and people motivation, fundamentally you have to become a person of influence, right? And in fact, that is about leadership. In fact, I recall one situation where my boss called me and said, the CEO of the organization, he said, Shiv, you understand, he was trying to make a point. So he was telling me, Shiv, come and sit here in my chair. I said, what? No, come and sit here in my chair. So I went and sat in the CEO's chair, and he said, Shiv, do you realize now in this chair, you really have no control as you would actually believe. Oh, the CEO has got all the control. He said, this chair is about influence. You have so many years of experience. I don't want to be directing you. I want to set some goals and help support, but be a positive influence in you are achieving those goals. So with stakeholders, especially with external stakeholders, you have to become a person of influence. And it works well with longer term engagements where we have the tenure to connect with stakeholders, graduate to that degree of influence with the stakeholders. I think that is a very important. The same thing is true, as you said, with the team. It is exactly the team. You're not going to sit in a corner and issue fiats and the team is expected to follow, right? They're not going to do it. Your own kids are not doing that, right? You think your kids will take orders from you? No way. So you have to demonstrate that you are a person of support and you are a person who will develop influence over them over a period of time through demonstrating your value as a manager and as a leader. And that is when people will listen to you and actually over a period of time align with the goals and deliver to the goals. It's not that you don't expect them to be driven by control. It doesn't work, right? This was again a realization of moving from the people orientation and the facilitative style, which over a period of time hopefully I developed. It made a big difference. And I think some cases just amazing what people can do. I was fortunate that I had some really capable people working for me. They hardly any time that they had to be told what to do. You had to just ask them their questions and how they arrived at certain decisions, and they will figure it out by themselves. It was a big moment, very uncomfortable moment to let go of that, to be able to tell them exactly what they need to be doing, although you may think that you have the right solution, and which very often you don't.
Very true.
So I think the change was to realize influence is what you need to develop
Okay.
as a leader. Yeah.
As a leader, you're a very successful coach. In PM Power as well as outside, right? So you're saying one is influence. When you say influence without manager or being a command of their, let's say, performance or any of that. So you're saying one is the creating that tenure or a trust that you spoke about. What else works? Does knowledge work? Having a better knowledge in that area works?
I think it's a very interesting discussion I had with one of my fellow coaches. So he said that there are ways in which that project team needs to recognize your value as a coach, right? So he had a certain point of view that, okay, so the coach should actually engage in these kind of discussions. Like, for example, technical aspects, engineering practices, right? I should be able to add value in terms of engineering practices. That's his point of view. Whereas I felt that a coach, as in the agile world, right? There are various hats that a coach wears, right? Scrum custodian, for example. He is a teacher, right? He is a leader who needs to lead change. The team is not, in some cases, it needs leadership from the coach to be able to take the team to the next level of performance. And of course, the knowledge of coaching as a practice and maybe domain, right? Understand the business domain, the application domain. I know, Gayatri, that in your coaching stage, sometimes you got some pretty good handle because you know the domain so well. So the team also knows you understand their domain, then you can connect with what they are doing. Knowledge is a very important part. Knowledge of Scrum, knowledge of domain, knowledge of business practices, knowledge of operations. They're all knowledge to me, right? And not every coach is adept at adding value in all those dimensions. Sometimes just people pick something and say, okay, I can add value there. If the person is very technically oriented, he can add value. So my advice to this coach was that look at multiple dimensions of adding value, whether it is knowledge or anything else or various categories and then the team will see the value of it by themselves, not only in some narrow area of coaching, right? So it may be very tempting to say, in fact, I was saying that, are you talking about mentoring? Because in some cases, in my coaching experience, especially in individual performance coaching, people expect certain situations amenable for mentoring. It's not that everything goes me wearing a coaching hat. Sometimes people have a situation and they're more than happy to receive some pointers. So my coaching has always been a blend of a little bit of coaching, mentoring as required. So that those mentoring situations also people remember. I mean, oh, okay, this is a good idea that I got from. So, but I let them explore. It's not, I tell them with the caveats that this is one way of approaching it. Feel free to explore other avenues. It's not, I have the right solution. It's just one way of approaching it. So you got to be a little careful about this balancing act. You don't want to be telling them a lot of things and then leave them explore, ask powerful questions and so on and so forth, all the classical coaching style. But be conscious that the value of your coaching is realized by the team almost by default. I think the key thing is if you approach coaching saying that your objective is, I want to be a great coach, I want to be recognized as a great coach, then I feel somehow you're missing the point. Because I think the nuance is that I want to be able to make a difference to this individual or to this team. Whether these guys recognize me as a great coach or not, I'm not worried about that. No, I'm not worried about that outcome. It is almost a Gita-like attitude. that I'm not really worried about some aspects because that is not entirely in your control. Coaching is, after all, a very subtle thing. Sometimes people say, oh, great, fantastic. Quotation is that, I remember reading somewhere that you should be there as a coach when the team really doesn't want you there. And when the team really wants you there, that is time to exit.
Interesting, very interesting way to put it, Shiv. I think one is the having multiple hats as a coach and helping them realize themselves. And
Right.
most importantly, let them experiment. You're actually giving them the freedom to go and
Yes.
experiment, understand what their learning is, and come back and share with you. So that
Right.
it's not a lonely journey, right? Often say a leadership at a top level, it's a very lonely journey, but it
Right.
doesn't have to be. If you have a coach with you, you can share your ideas, you can share your thoughts, and also bring that level of brainstorming. Very well put.
Thank you. Different styles of coaching are there, and we could talk about coaching for a long time to come. We'll have some discussions even outside.
In fact, one of the things that I was thinking is we should have one podcast only on coaching styles.
Coaching styles, I think it's fantastic. Given the same situation, people can approach it in multiple different ways.
I think while a lot of my thoughts are going on, what can be the next set of podcasts that can run with Shiv, I wanted to understand, there are a few turning points in your career. And based on yours, what are a couple of...
Yeah, some of the things in my journey, some memorable ones, before I get to your question, is that this learning has always fascinated me. And this journey has taken me to very interesting places. Like we picked up like storytelling from childhood, I've been very fond of. And that's because I used to hear all this Mahabharata and Ramayana from my aunt, who was an excellent storyteller. I have a fascination. I'm addicted to books. So, Tamil books, English books, especially modern Tamil literature. Kalki Krishnamurthy's books, Ponniyin Selvan, which I have read several times. And I used to be fascinated by their ability to present things. Although it is in written form, they'll be so vivid that it's almost like you're watching a movie. And I felt how powerful that was. And one of my things that as a trainer and as a coach also, to be able to develop situations based on actual project experiences. Some of these project experiences I told you a little while back, they have been packaged into some examples and case studies and case lists. And some parts of it were moved and for information kind of content was moved into e-learning. Some parts of it were converted in games. And these days, gamification is a very important aspect of it. So as you said, maybe that's another podcast for later in terms of how various experiments we have tried within PM Power, improving our learning modules, teaching from the back of the class. And I think the 2 or 3 key things, the takeaways that you mentioned is that, I think I mentioned it in the beginning, experiment early, right? I think early in your career, you're not under so much pressure. You have the time, you have the options in front of you. And I think rather than go in one particular track, try several things in the first 6 to 8 years of your career. I think that is a very important moment for experimentation. So in hindsight, I would say I should have experimented a lot. That would have given rise to a lot more things. Like, for example, I discovered pretty late my passion for writing, simply because there was not enough, whether it is writing case studies or writing fiction. In fact, I'm now writing a collection of sketches of people in our own family. So it is like a small monograph. So unless you attempt writing, you don't realize you like it, you love it, right? And you want to write just for the experience of it, not really wanting to be a best-selling author and making huge amounts of money a la Chetan Bhagat. So you're just doing things for the pleasure of doing it. And I think it's a fortunate position to be able to do things just for the pleasure of doing it. So unless you experiment early, you don't discover all these things. And the earlier you discover, the more you can practice those things, writing, for example, and enjoy it even for a longer period of time. So I think that is the only thing, rather than as a regret, if other people are at that earlier stage in their career, like for example, wanting to become a consultant or a writer or a coach and things like that, there are things that they need to be able to do in order to prepare for it, for the long haul and not constrain yourself to your demands of the existing job. So some of this requires experimentation and a little longer term planning to be able to prepare for yourself. And of course, like I said, find the right mentor. I would even say find an unforgiving mentor who will not take no for an answer, like Gayatri. So I think it's important people to tell you very frankly where you are and what you need to do and what you need to do better and how to get better and things like that. It's not only a criticism, but also giving you that confidence and self-belief. I think this is very important early in your career. After a period of time, you get very comfortable with who you are. And then you can take things out of your own drive. And earlier in the career, that kind, very active, and maybe you would even call it very intrusive mentorship is needed. At least certainly, I felt I could have had more of that earlier.
You're saying almost like a guiding beacon, right? And an uncomfortable mirror to yourself. That is be a mentor and continue to seek those mentors as you change your own career and
Yeah, exactly.
moving
Exactly.
forward. Experiment early, experiment often, and having more mentors, intrusive mentors. I like that term.
I like your phrase, Gayatri. Make sure you have an uncomfortable mirror.
Uncomfortable mirror. All right.
Uncomfortable mirror. That's a nice expression. Shows you like it is.
Very, very well put, Shiv. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. I hope that more podcasts you participate and be a guest host in Software People Stories. Thank you so much for your time, Shiv. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. I really haven't talked about myself in a forum like this. This is the first time, like I said, and it's very nice to reflect back and to be able to articulate it like this and to be able to be of some assistance to people who will find these takeaways at whatever stage they are in their career. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Would love it.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Malavika for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.